I was driving through Nevada at 2 in the morning when I took an exit that wasn't there yesterday. What I found at the bottom of that ramp changed everything I thought I knew about reality. There was a town there, complete with streetlights glowing orange against the black sky, rows of houses, storefronts with signs still hanging, cars parked along the curbs. The problem was that there shouldn't have been anything there at all. I'd driven this stretch of Interstate 80 dozens of times over 5 years, and I'd never seen this exit before, never noticed any signs indicating a town nearby. When I checked my road atlas at the rest area 60 miles back, there had been nothing marked in this area except empty desert. But here it was, solid and real and impossible, waiting for me in the darkness. I should have turned around right then. Every instinct was screaming at me to get back on that highway and pretend I'd never seen this place. But I kept moving forward, driven by curiosity and that strange compulsion you feel when you know something is wrong, but you can't look away. I drove slowly down the main street, my headlights illuminating details that made the wrongness settle deeper into my bones with every passing second. The streetlights were on, but not a single light burned in any window. The cars were all older models, nothing newer than the early 90s, covered in thick dust that suggested they'd been sitting there for years. The storefronts had names painted on their windows: Emma's Diner, Riverside Hardware, the Copper Bell Saloon. But the paint was faded and peeling, and through the glass I could see only darkness. The town was laid out in a perfect grid, 6 streets running north to south, 6 running east to west, all meeting at right angles with geometric precision that felt artificial, like a movie set built to represent an idea of a town rather than a place where people actually lived. At the center was a small square with a gazebo, and beyond that a church steeple rising against the stars. Everything was neat, orderly, preserved, but completely, utterly empty. No people, no dogs, no sound except the low hum of those orange streetlights and my truck's engine echoing off the buildings in a way that made the silence feel even heavier. I stopped in the middle of the street and just sat there, trying to process what I was seeing. That's when I noticed something that sent cold fear straight through my chest. Every single clock I could see, the one on the church tower, the one in a jewelry store window, even the clock on the dashboard of a parked car, they were all stopped at exactly 3:33. Not 3:32 or 3:34, but 3:33 precisely, as if time itself had frozen at that exact moment and never started again. Hit that like button right now, because what I'm about to tell you is going to change the way you think about the places you drive through, the exits you pass without thinking. If you've ever felt like you've driven through somewhere that shouldn't exist, you need to subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story isn't just something that happened to me, it could happen to anyone. I got out of the truck, which was probably the stupidest thing I could have done. The air was cold, much colder than it should have been for Nevada in July, and it had a strange thickness that made each breath feel substantial. My footsteps sounded too loud, echoing, until it seemed like there were a dozen people walking behind me. I walked to the diner and pressed my face against the glass to look inside. The interior was frozen in time, booths with red vinyl seats, a long counter with chrome stools, menus still lying on tables as if customers had just walked away mid-meal. But everything was covered in thick gray dust that hung in the air in visible clouds. The door was locked, sealed shut by rust. I moved to the hardware store and found the same thing. Shelves stocked with tools, price tags still attached, but everything abandoned, everything locked away behind doors that hadn't been opened in decades. I checked every building, every car, looking for any sign of life, and found nothing. Some houses had newspapers on their porches, yellowed and brittle, and when I picked one up, it read October 18th, 1987. The headline was about a local high school football game, completely mundane, nothing that would explain why this entire town had been abandoned on that date and then left to sit here for over 30 years without appearing on a single map. That's when I heard the sound. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, a hum, low and rhythmic, almost like machinery running somewhere beneath the ground. And underneath that hum was something else, something that might have been voices, dozens or hundreds of voices all talking at once in a constant murmur that never quite resolved into actual words. The sound was coming from everywhere and nowhere, and it made my skin crawl with primal terror. I started walking back toward my truck, trying not to run, but the sound was getting louder and the streetlights were starting to flicker, their orange glow pulsing in rhythm with the humming. That's when I saw it, movement in a second-story window across the street. Just a shadow, just a shape that was there for a second and then gone, but it was enough. I ran, sprinted back to my truck, and peeled out of there so fast I left rubber on the pavement. In my rearview mirror, the streetlights were still flickering, and for just a split second, I could have sworn I saw figures standing in the street, dozens of them, all perfectly still, all watching me go. I found the interstate again about 10 minutes later and didn't stop driving until the sun came up and I was 200 miles away. I told myself I'd imagined it, that I'd been too tired and had hallucinated, but I knew that wasn't true. It had been real, as physical as the truck I was driving. When I got to Salt Lake City, I went straight to a library and started searching for any information about abandoned towns in that area. I found dozens of references to old mining camps, but none of them matched the location, and none had been abandoned in 1987. It was like the towns simply didn't exist in any historical record. For 3 days, I tried to forget about it, but I couldn't. It gnawed at me, those empty streets, those stopped clocks, that sound of voices in the darkness. So on my return trip, I made sure to approach the same stretch of interstate at around 2 in the morning, watching carefully for that exit ramp. And I found it again, exactly where it had been before. This time I had a camera with me. I was going to document everything, prove that this place existed. The town was exactly as I'd left it, every detail identical. But this time, I noticed something I'd missed. In the center of the town square, underneath the gazebo, there was a plaque on a stone pedestal. I walked over and read the inscription. It said, "Cornerstone, laid April 15th, 1983. May this town stand as a beacon of progress and prosperity for generations to come." Below were about 24 names. And at the very bottom, in smaller letters, something that made my blood run cold. Project Iteration Site 7 of 12. Project Iteration. I had no idea what that meant, but those words filled me with dread that went beyond anything I'd felt before. This wasn't just an abandoned town. This was something that had been built, deliberately constructed for some purpose. The whole place was fundamentally artificial, a simulation or an experiment or something even stranger. I started taking photos of everything, the plaque, the buildings, the stopped clocks, anything that might help me understand. That's when the humming started again, louder this time, much louder, and the ground began to vibrate like something massive was moving underneath it. How many times have you experienced something like this and kept it to yourself, afraid no one would believe you? I know exactly how that feels. Comment down below and write, "I've experienced something similar and kept it to myself." You don't need to share details, but leave that phrase there. Other people will read it and realize they're not alone. The streetlights went out all at once, plunging the entire town into complete darkness. My camera was still recording, but I couldn't see anything, couldn't see where I was going as I stumbled backward. The humming had become a roar, a sound so loud I could feel it in my chest, in my bones. And then the lights came back on, brighter, whiter, almost blinding. And in that harsh illumination, I could see that the town had changed. The buildings were the same, but also different, shifted slightly, rotated, or moved in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The cars were in different positions, the newspapers had vanished, and standing in the middle of the street, right where my truck should have been, were figures. They looked like people at first glance, but when I looked closer, I could see they were wrong. Their proportions slightly off, their movements too smooth and synchronized, like puppets controlled by the same invisible hand. There were maybe a dozen of them, all looking directly at me, and they all began to move toward me in perfect unison, their feet making no sound. I ran through those impossible streets, past buildings that changed every time I looked away, past intersections that led to streets that hadn't existed moments before. The figures followed, always the same distance behind, never gaining but never falling back, maintaining that precise separation as if it had been programmed. I could hear their breathing, or something like breathing, a rhythmic hissing that matched the humming. I don't know how long I ran, how many times I turned corners and found myself on streets I'd already passed. Time had stopped following normal rules. My lungs were burning, but I couldn't stop, because some deep instinct told me that if those figures caught me, I would become like them, another puppet moving through these empty streets forever. Then I saw it, my truck, sitting at the end of a street that I knew hadn't been there before, engines still running. I didn't question it. I just ran, threw myself into the driver's seat, and slammed my foot on the accelerator. Behind me, those figures stood in a line across the street, watching but not pursuing. And as I drove past the last building, I heard that humming one more time, rising to a crescendo that felt like it was going to tear reality apart. Then silence. Absolute silence. I was back on the county road, and when I looked back, there was nothing there. No town, no streetlights, no exit ramp, just empty desert. I drove to a truck stop 30 miles down the road and sat in the parking lot until dawn, reviewing the footage on my camera, needing proof. But when I played back the recording, there was nothing there. No town, no buildings, no figures. Just darkness and static and my own panicked breathing. Hours of footage showing me running through empty desert, alone, recording nothing. But I knew what I'd seen, and no amount of blank footage was going to convince me otherwise. Then, exactly 3 weeks after my first visit, I got a visit of my own. Someone knocked on my door at 3:33 in the morning. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 people in dark suits holding identification badges that didn't belong to any agency I recognized. They told me they needed to ask about my recent driving routes, about any unusual sights I might have seen. I denied everything at first, but the way they looked at me made it clear they already knew. The woman pulled out a tablet and showed me satellite images of that highway, and in these images I could see that exit ramp leading to something that looked like a town, but was pixelated and blurred in a way that suggested the cameras couldn't quite process it properly. They told me what I'd found was classified, that I needed to sign documents promising never to speak about it, never to attempt to find it again, never to research anything related to Project Iteration. They said there were 12 sites in total, scattered across the western United States, all built in the early 80s as part of some experiment that had been shut down after what they called unexpected complications. They wouldn't tell me what the experiment had been for, or what happened to the people who were supposed to live in those towns. I signed the papers, but before they left, the man said something that's haunted me ever since. He said, "The towns don't like being found." They were built to exist in a certain way, and when that schedule is disrupted, they react. You were lucky. Most people who find them don't come back, or they come back changed in ways that make them no longer quite human. Whatever followed you through those streets, it's still looking for you, so forget about it. Because if you go back, it will find you, and next time there won't be anyone to pull you out. If this story affected you, don't forget to leave a like right now and subscribe, because each new video brings a new piece of this puzzle about impossible places. You won't want to miss what's coming. The thing that keeps me up at night is that plaque and what it said about those towns being beacons of progress and prosperity. If that's what they were supposed to be, then what does it mean that they all failed? that they all became empty and wrong, and inhabited by things that only look human from a distance. I've done careful research and found references to something called the Cornerstone Initiative, a classified program from the early 80s that was supposedly about urban planning, but was actually about something much stranger. Something about testing whether human consciousness could be recorded and replicated, whether entire communities could be preserved, not just physically, but psychologically, whether it was possible to create places that existed outside normal causality, outside the regular flow of time. The program was shut down in 1987, right around October 18th. I think something went wrong. I think whatever they were trying to do succeeded in a way they didn't expect, in a way they couldn't control. I think those towns became conscious somehow, became aware, and they're still out there, still waiting for people like me to stumble across them. And I think the things I saw, those figures that looked almost but not quite human, I think they might have been the original residents, transformed into something else, extensions of whatever strange intelligence those places developed. Because here's what terrifies me more than anything. 3 nights ago, at exactly 3:33 in the morning, I woke up and looked out my apartment window, and for just a second I saw my entire street transformed. The buildings were different, older, the cars were gone, the streetlights were that same sickly orange, and standing on the sidewalk directly below my window were a dozen figures in clothes from the 1980s, all perfectly still, all watching me with eyes that caught the light in a way that human eyes shouldn't. Then I blinked and everything was normal again. I don't know if it was a dream or if somehow that town followed me home, leaked into my reality. All I know is that I can't stop seeing 333 everywhere, can't stop feeling like I'm being watched, can't stop wondering if one morning I'm going to wake up and find myself back in that town, but this time without any way to escape. That wrong turn off Interstate 80, that exit that appeared out of nowhere, I think it wasn't wrong at all. I think it was exactly what was supposed to happen. That those sites were built to draw people in, to trap them. And if that's true, then how many others are out there? How many people have vanished into places that don't appear on any map? Places that exist in the gaps between reality, waiting for the next person to take the wrong exit and discover that sometimes the places you find aren't places at all, but something else entirely. Something that's been waiting a very long time for someone like you to finally come home.